Marriott.
Community center is a lot
It's
less
gonna-
convenient
Okay.
to run with their churches too. And I also think,
Well, I think that's a good thing.
Okay.
But it's less convenient.
Then they do it like Tuesday, Wednesday,
I felt bad then.
I usually get lights together.
Invitation.
Yeah, so I just wanted to let you know.
That'd be nice.
Oh, yeah, it's lovely.
Various states and
It's a great idea too.
in these, that's a nice way to
Fits
put
right
it.
in with the
And
holiday. Perfect.
This meeting is called to order in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act. This meeting was included in a list of meeting dates sent to the Home News Tribune, the Star Ledger, and the Highland Park Planet on January 3rd, 2019, and was posted on the bulletin board of Borough Hall, 221 South 5th Avenue on January 3rd, 2019, and has remained continuously posted as required by law. Fire exits are to my left and to my right. If you come up to speak, please speak into the microphones, and assistive listening devices are available. Matt Hirsch, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Mayor Burlmiller,
Here.
Councilman Klein,
Here.
Councilwoman Foster Dublin,
Here.
Councilman George,
Here.
Councilman Hale,
Here.
Councilwoman Kim Chohan,
Here.
Councilwoman Welkowitz,
Here.
Borough Attorney Schmier,
Here.
Borough Administrator Holder.
here,
Okay, so I just want to inform everyone about how tonight's meeting has been put together. This is a special meeting of the governing body due to the holidays that occur throughout October. As you can see, the agenda is very short. We can address items that require governing body action before the next regular meeting on October 29th. You'll see there are items that include things that have to get paid, appointments that have to be made, and that's the reason for this meeting, as well as the work session that was scheduled to allow the council to come to a conclusion on a resolution that we've been debating. So the next regular council meeting is on October 29th, and then we'll move to our conference meeting right after the regular meeting to work on the anti-Semitism resolution, which I've spoken with the council about to roll up their sleeves and work on tonight in this work session. There will be an initial 15-minute comment session with speakers limited to 3 minutes each, as per usual. There will be a second public comment session for the community at the end of the regular meeting, as there usually is. But tonight, in order to give the governing body time to address the language in the anti-Semitism resolution that will be listed for consideration of passage at the meeting on the 29th, we will also limit comments in the second session to 3 minutes as well, so that as many voices could be heard in order for us to make the hard end of 9 p.m., which is the regular council meeting required end time, unless any emergencies come up and we need to vote to extend beyond 9 p.m. The report by Councilwoman Welkowitz on the Rutgers Bike and e-scooter program can be provided via email if anyone is interested on the council or otherwise. I believe it's going to be posted eventually on the website, and no other formal action will be taken at this meeting. So I wanted everyone to understand that. Given that, we are about to go into our first 15-minute public discussion. Each person is limited to 3 minutes. The borough administrator will be keeping time on that. I'm sorry. Oh, yes. Thank you for that.
Limited to the first session consent agenda?
Yes, but before we get into the public discussion, which, by the way, that portion is required to be limited to things that are on the agenda for the meeting, I've asked Councilwoman Foster Dublin to give a brief report because there's been a lot of activity in her area of public safety. So, Councilwoman?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll bring everyone up to date. The Public Safety Committee met with the First Aid Squad on June 6th, and it was a productive conversation with the squad, and they made a case for resuming daytime hours coverage Monday through Friday. On June 11th, at the recommendation of the Public Safety Committee, the Borough Council rejected Robert Wood Johnson's proposal for daytime coverage Monday through Friday because we did not want to commit to a 2-year agreement with Robert Wood Johnson, especially if the squad may be able to take on those hours. Robert Wood Johnson understood the position of the borough and agreed to keep the daytime response from Monday through Friday while the borough figured out our next step with the squads. I should mention that the borough does not pay for services or get refunds from Robert Wood Johnson for these services. On July 12th, the Public Safety Committee met the provisions that were made and set apart to figure an agreement with the First Aid Squad. Then we asked our borough administrator to work with our borough attorney to draft an agreement. An agreement was drafted on August 12th and was sent to the Public Safety Committee via email. During that same period, some concerns emerged. One, starting in late June, the council members received some seemingly credible report that the squad was having difficulty covering existing evening and weekend shift. We have been working with the police department to get the necessary data to evaluate the report. Two, more recently, council learned of an incident where a squad member was inappropriately hostile towards police officers at a scene in front of a patient in need. The behavior significantly delayed the trip to the ER. The incident was recorded by the police body cameras, and the Public Safety Committee was able to see the incident for themselves, and we were concerned. We have had similar concerns raised in the past, including one case where a complaint was made against a different member of the squad by a nurse at one of our area hospitals. And while I have the floor, I want to take a moment to say that I could have been done better with my communication in regards to the First Aid Squad. But truth be told, Public Safety Committee has had its hand filled with a lot of pressing issues as of lately. With that, I am pleased to report that we have had good responses to the position of Emergency Service Director. The position will work hard on bringing someone on board at the end of the month. We'll work hard on bringing someone at the end of the month. The position will closely work with all emergency services, First Aid Squad, Fire Department, and OEM. And just one more thing, Mayor. The Lacey Davis report, as the Mayor mentioned, will be available. We'll be hosting a community forum on October 16th at 7 p.m. at the Community Center. And the report will be revealed to the public is then Dr. DeLacy will be presenting at that time. We will also make the report available on the Borough website. So we ask everyone to please come out and to hear what happened in the report. Listen to Dr. Davis, and you'll get a complete update, and there'll be opportunities for question and answer at that time. Lastly, just one thing, on a much lighter note, that the 28th of this month, we won't have another council meeting until the 29th. On the 28th of this month, it will be a truck dive. There will be a Halloween giveaway, candy and treats from the police department from 4 to 6 p.m. at the community center. Please come out. Thank you.
So I also want to add to Councilwoman Foster Dublin's report that the DeLacy Davis report will be up on our website next week. Okay. I'm going to open for public comment. This is the portion of the public comment that is on matters pertaining to the agenda. Each person that comes up to speak will have 3 minutes. The borough administrator will alert us when the 3 minutes are up, and that is to allow as many people as possible to speak. So if you have any questions or comments on the agenda items for tonight, please step up to the microphone and state your name and address.
My name is David Lowenstein, 116 South 4th Avenue, Highland Park, New Jersey. We just listened to a report that A is so completely one-sided and so completely unfair and so completely unprofessional. Okay, first of all, if you want to stand up here and say publicly, as you did, there was a delay in patient care or a delay in getting a patient to the hospital, can I please tell the entire council so they know? If I go to pick up a patient and that patient doesn't tell me they want to go to the hospital when they're conscious and they're alert, I cannot take that patient. I will be kidnapping that patient if I do so. That patient did not call 911. Somebody else did because that patient was sleeping on a park bench. The police officers were not in the back of the ambulance. They were outside. When the patient refused to tell me if they wanted to go, I had to bring the police officers in. And then when they said they wanted to go, I said to the officer, what am I taking them for? And again, for those of you who don't know, and it's a shame possibly you don't know, but when we go to Robert Wood in particular, the nurse stands there and says, why is the patient here? And when I say to them, I don't know, because they wanted to come here, I get yelled at by them. This time, the officer point blank said, tell them to call Highland Park Police. So it's very nice that you got to see body cam that I requested to see, and I still haven't seen it, because I'm the one that initiated the request for a meeting with the police department in a private matter. When I went to school, conflict resolution was taught that when it's a small conflict, you deal with it and you end it. You make it bigger, it gets bigger and longer and harder. But now, the chief of police has been told he may not meet with the first aid squad or the fire department without their Royal Highness permission first. This is not the way to run a business. There was no problem on that call except the dispatch was incorrect. We were dispatched for an evaluation. You know, as well as I know, when we evaluate patients that are EDPs, we do not go lights and sirens. When we evaluate patients that are medical, we go lights and sirens. We were not given that information. I picked up the red phone. I called headquarters. Headquarters did not answer the phone because they were busy. I got on the radio and called in service and asked them what we were going for. I got a response that said, call headquarters. I said, I can't. I'm driving an ambulance. That's when he finally came out and said, it was a medical evaluation. So at that point, I knew to light it up and go lights and sirens. Nothing was a major big deal. And that's all we wanted to do was talk to the department and quietly end this. But no, now we have to blow this whole thing up into a huge mess for no reason.
Thank you,
I would
David.
like an answer to my questions.
It's 3 minutes.
Okay, so I'm asking for an answer now.
Okay, so if you could sit down, we'll get back to additional questions.
So you're not going to answer my question?
No, I'm not saying
So-
that.
So I sit down and then how are you going to answer?
Okay.
Unbelievable.
Are there any other questions pertaining to the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we are going to move on. May I have a motion to adopt item numbers 9 through 17.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilman Fine,
Yes.
Councilwoman Foster Dublin.
Yes.
Councilman George,
Yes.
Councilman Hale,
Yes.
Councilwoman Kim Cho-Han,
Yes.
Councilwoman Walkovich,
Yes.
Okay, I am appointing the following to the Zoning Board of Adjustment: Stan Pheasant, Wolfram Hoffer, Robert Hulseful, and Dana Korbman. May I have a motion to confirm?
So moved. Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilman Fine,
Yes.
Councilwoman Foster Dublin.
Yes.
Councilman George,
Yes.
Councilman Hale,
Yes.
Councilwoman Kim Cho-Han,
Yes.
Councilwoman Walkovich,
I'd just like to say I'm delighted to have these very dedicated volunteers reappointed to our zoning board. So yes, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going into the second public discussion. This is the point at which you can talk about anything that you would like to raise. Again, I want to remind everyone, we're going to stick with a hard stop by 9 p.m. Each person who comes up will have 3 minutes to talk so that we can get as many people as possible up to talk. And if you have already spoken, allow somebody else to speak. Please state your name and address.
Just one question, Mayor.
Yes.
Just to clarify, so if someone has finished their 3 minutes, they can sit down, they can come back up only after
Correct.
everybody has
Correct.
had a chance?
Thank
Okay.
you.
John Kovac, North 3rd Avenue, Highland Park. Some have said it is divisive to include the BDS Israel boycott movement in an anti-Semitism resolution, therefore suggesting that it is only acceptable for Highland Park to oppose anti-Semitism with a generic resolution, or with one that identifies only right-wing white supremacist anti-Semitism. To use the term divisive in this context is to express concern about offending some people. But who, other than BDS supporters, are those promoters of social harmony concerned about offending? Apparently nobody. What is left unspoken, what is ignored, what is pretended not to exist, what is wished away, is the blunt fact that the majority of the Jewish community of Highland Park rightfully sees the BDS movement as an anti-Semitic hate group. The majority of Highland Park's Jewish residents are greatly offended by the fact that BDS is pushing on our town and library a hateful, violence-promoting agenda fraudulently disguised as human rights, diversity, and free speech. To ignore this BDS aggression is willful blindness at best. It is likewise willfully blind to pretend that omitting the BDS agenda in an anti-Semitism resolution will be any less divisive. It certainly will not be. Offense will be caused to some regardless of what the council does. You cannot avoid taking sides. Moreover, this decision should not be made based on political considerations. It therefore behooves this council to make the morally correct choice. Put yourselves on the side of other New Jersey towns, the state of New Jersey, the United States Congress, the government of Germany, and the United Nations, among others. Affirm that the demonization, and application of double standards to Israel is anti-Semitism that demands to be condemned along with other forms of anti-Semitism. To do anything less is an abdication of moral duty.
Hello, my name is Mariam Gordon. My address is 207 South Fifth Avenue. And I've lived in Highland Park since I was 6 months old. I currently work at a Holocaust museum in Brooklyn, teaching children of today about the horrors of anti-Semitism not so long ago and not so far away. Not long ago, not far away. That's the tagline for the current exhibit at the Holocaust Museum in Manhattan, which I recently visited. At the exhibit opening, Ronald Lauder, acclaimed Jewish philanthropist who focuses on Holocaust education, made a point of stressing how in that line is the lesson that we need to continue to stand up to anti-Semitism on the rise today in our American society. I'm not suggesting, God forbid, that any of the politics here in Highland Park would ever go that far, but things have certainly been unsettled for the local Jewish community here as of late. It has been a frightening time for American Jewry from all elements of the political spectrum. We are currently at 341 days since the attack on Jews in Pittsburgh, 159 days since Jews were shot in Poway, 38 days since Rabbi Avram Gopin had his face smashed with a brick while jogging in Crown Heights, and a mere 4 days since a synagogue in Brooklyn was vandalized over Rosh Hashanah, just the latest in the string of violent attacks on visible Jews less than 1 hour away from this town we call home. Additionally, there have been near constant efforts to prevent Jews from moving into communities in Rockland and Ocean counties, as well as attempts to ensure that Jews in those counties do not feel safer at home there. I have many friends in the UK through our shared anti-Semitism advocacy and education work and beyond who share with me their concerns about their safety in the UK and dire warnings about the safety of American Jewry. My British friends tell me that they have been pushed out of liberal and progressive groups for their refusal to shut up about anti-Semitism. They tell me to never shut up, to never stop being on guard, to never stop being vigilant for the anti-Semitism that snuck into liberal political systems, most notably under the guise of simply being anti-Israel. Anti-Semitism is on the rise, and it seems to be the hottest topic of conversation here in our beloved safe haven of Highland Park. I, along with many in this room, are heartbroken by the turn our town seems to have taken in the past several months. When I heard that anti-Semitic organizations were managing to infiltrate our library in our town, I was heartbroken. I don't need to stand here and reiterate how these various organizations are anti-Semitic and don't want peace. You've heard that already, and if you care, you realize why that is terrifying for the Jewish community. I understand multiculturalism, intersectionality, learning about other cultures. I would be happy to support businesses and organizations that work to ensure that money is actually going to help the Palestinian people. I'm not here to debate Israel versus Palestine. As far as I know, the Peace for Palestine event has been postponed and is being rescheduled. I'm grateful to the town and its leadership for that, especially at this time of year when Jews are so vulnerable. I pray to God and beseech all of you to not let this happen, to ensure that hate has no home here. There have been people saying that the Jewish community is divided over the anti-Semitism resolution. I don't believe that is true as far as I can tell. We are united. We are united in our fear for our lives that anti-Semitism can make inroads here disguised under liberal and progressive causes like it has in the UK. We're united in our gratitude that the town and its leadership are working to ensure our safety. And mark my words, we're united in the face of those that continue to push for this event and others like it. We're united behind those that stand up to support us no matter the pressure. Our town needs to be united in hate having no home here and all members of the small town feeling safe. And ensuring that if a group of people say that something here makes them feel unsafe, we take a stand and ensure that hate truly has no home here. Not long ago, not far away. I'm one sentence from finishing it. Last sentence, thank you. Anti-Semitism is alive and well in American society, and we need to ensure that we are doing all that we can to put a stop to it. Thank you for your support and advocacy, ensuring that Highland Park remains a safe home for all.
Thank you.
Robin Lowenstein, 116 South 4th Avenue. I don't have something specifically prepared. I'm a little blindsided by the very, very, very twisted facts that were, I'll say facts with air quotes, that were presented tonight about public safety. I have some questions. One question is if the mayor and council president specifically believe that you guys sitting up there are actually meant to represent your constituents. I also would like to know if you recall several months ago when I asked a question and Mayor Mittler said, Robin, I really wish you would have just emailed me privately about this. So I'm wondering why, when I emailed on July 31st with very specific questions, I was completely ignored. When I emailed again 3 weeks later and said, why am I being completely ignored, I continued to be completely ignored. No response whatsoever. None. I think that Councilwoman Foster Dublin is getting ahead of anybody saying that her communication was lacking by acknowledging it. But I literally wrote emails using the word begging. I am begging you to answer me. And no answer, none whatsoever. No answer to the town, no answer to the citizens, no honesty. And I'm curious to know if you believe that you're actually answerable to your constituents. Because I think there's things they'd like to know. I think there's a lot of things that we have a right to know. And we don't necessarily have to like the answers, but to get no answer whatsoever is unacceptable, inexcusable, and just downright rude. And since I probably have more time left, you might want to maybe answer some of those questions.
So, Robin, you say you wrote on July 31st. Who did you send it to?
You,
Who else?
Council President Phil George, a couple of the other council members. Would you like me to read it? I'll read it out loud.
No, I'm
very
just,
happy to share
I'm
with
just,
everybody.
I'm,
not sharing
can
yours,
you
I'm
answer me?
sharing my own.
Can you answer?
Yes, July 31st, and then again, August 20th, it went to you, it went to Philip George, it was copied to Matt Hale, Susan Welkowitz. No response from anybody. Begging, please, I literally said, I am begging. Elsie Foster Dublin, wondering where we're at. Subsequent to our last meeting, still no response. Hate to beg, but I'm waiting 2 weeks for an answer to very specific questions. Why can't we call dispatch in the morning and say, yes, we have a crew, no, we don't? Not even go to hell. Nothing, not even
Okay.
a response. Nothing.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to know
Well,
what
I
what
need to know, so what's the answer?
Okay, first of all, I just wanted to know when you sent that so I can go through my emails and find it.
You mean you accidentally missed it twice?
Robin, I get 530 emails a day.
But yet you said, Robin, I'd prefer if you would email me privately. And all these other
Okay,
people missed it
thank
twice too.
you. Next.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm Sam Friedman, Lawrence Avenue. I've lived here since 1974. My daughter went through the schools. My daughter lived in Squirrel Hill, Pittsburgh. I worked in the World Trade Center at the time it was destroyed. So I know something about a lot of forms of oppression. I have in front of me a resolution against all forms of anti-Semitism and discrimination. I do not know if this is the only bill before you on this topic or not. I have read it carefully. It is full of half-truths, distortions, and outright lies and self-contradictions. I don't know how much time I'll have and how long it'll take, but I'm going to go through some of that. It talks about Jewish residents being accosted and all the rest of it and attacked. It doesn't talk about Jewish residents being called self-hating Jews, which happens. It doesn't talk about Arabs and Palestinians being called dirty names. It doesn't talk about the racism against blacks or any of a number of other groups, but it does later on in the document say that if you're saying anything about Israel or Palestine or anti-Semitism, you have to list all the various forms of racism or you're being anti-Semitic. That's a self-contradiction. It talks about Highland Park, Israel, as the historic home of the Jews, yada, yada, yada. We all know that argument. To be consistent, and by the way, and then it talks about the Balfour Declaration, a white imperialist, British conservative representative of an occupying power, which is what was in that, in Palestine at that time, and says that that somehow has legitimacy when it promises some Palestinian land to Jewish people. It then says the same thing about the UN, and if you look at the countries that voted for that resolution, they were overwhelmingly imperial countries, whether it be Britain or France or Russia or you name it, were the people, the countries they controlled. It doesn't mention the fact that the Palestinians lived in Israel and had it as their sacred land and their homeland, and that the first thing that was done in 1948 was to drive 700,000 of them beyond the borders, and it then...
Excuse me, it's the 3-minute time. If you'd like to come back up after, you can.
I'll finish the sentence. And it then enacted a law of return, which against all international law, did not let the Palestinians return, but said any Jewish person in the world could return and come and become an Israeli citizen. That is a racist act. that distinction, and we will have further discussions later.
Thank you.
Josh Lowenstein, 116 South 4th Avenue. My question is, why is the Highland Park First Aid Squad only being called to answer 911 calls during the day, only after neither Robert Wood Johnson or JFK have an available ambulance to send? Shouldn't this be the opposite? Why is the Highland Park First Aid Squad being called only after Robert Wood Johnson and JFK both say they have no ambulances available to send to Highland Park during the daytime? Is there an answer to this question? Shouldn't it be an answer? Shouldn't it be the opposite?
Paul Schaff, South 7th Avenue. The squad claims that to date, they have supplied the council with information that the council has requested. Is that true?
It says discussion, so.
Okay, I just, Mr. Scharf,
Yes?
could you repeat the question? I just
The
needed to.
squad claims that to date, they have supplied the council with all the information that the council requested. Is that true?
I'd have to ask the borough administrator. Okay, go ahead.
I answer that question. When we met, we've had a number of meetings, and at the time when there were corrective actions that need to be done for things that were out of place, the request that there was a checklist that was put together, and they have completed the checklist.
Okay. Why hasn't the council followed through on the items that they said they would supply?
What items?
What items?
I don't have the items in, ID badges, sensitivity training, and current emergency operations plan.
We said that we would supply the criminal background check for members of the squad, that at any time they could go to the police department and get their ID. All they had to do was make an appointment.
I just happen to know the machine broke and they were working on it. So as far as I know, I don't.
Okay, wait. One person is at the
Well,
microphone, and
I
that who
just
can,
know
that
there
is
was
who
an
can
issue with
speak.
the machinery for the borough IDs.
Okay.
That I believe has been resolved. to my
Okay.
knowledge.
What about the current emergency operations plan? Anything being done on that?
I know the OEM has been working on the emergency operation plans, and there's supposed to be a meeting that will be held with not just with all of public safety. As I mentioned earlier in my report, that we're looking to hire a public safety director, and that person will be able to pull all the emergency services together and provide all the necessary training, documents, and what have you, to not just to all emergency services.
Okay.
Wait, 1 second. Borough Administrator, what is the title of the person that we put the job at?
Actually, Emergency Services Director.
Director.
Yeah.
And any sensitivity training being planned?
Oh,
That's
boy,
a
yes, it needs it.
personnel issue.
Yeah, I'll have to follow up with our HR coordinator. I don't know what the status is on that. I know
Okay.
we were looking at that in another area.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Hi,
Good
please-
evening.
Please state your name and address.
Sure. Good evening. I'm Rabbi Philip Beasley. I'm at 423 Lincoln Avenue in Highland Park. I'm the senior rabbi of Aunt Shamuth Memorial Temple in New Brunswick, New Jersey, which represents 500 families or 500 plus families, many of whom live here in Highland Park. I want to thank our town for bringing up the anti-Semitic resolution. I'm asking that you'd also include language for anti-BDS. Many who embrace BDS see it aimed primarily at ending Israel's occupation on the West Bank. Its demands sound innocuous enough. Withdrawing from Palestinian territory would create space for a coherent Palestinian state. I too believe that the only real hope for peace is with a two-state solution. However, BDS does not help this occur. It only foments the hatred of Jews. We all know that espoused goals don't always equate into reality. BDS is a magician's form of anti-Semitism. Look over here, this is what it's about. But over here, the real goal is happening, unfolding in front of us, and even getting people to buy into it who don't realize what the actual goal and nature of BDS is. The main organizing body and many of its affiliates buy into and then try to pass what is under a false choice, that if you support peace, you must support BDS, and if you don't, then you support a genocide. This is not a true choice. When I was a college student, I walked past some of these BDS rallies and have seen firsthand the encouragement of the painting of swastikas onto Israeli flags, and I have seen anti-Israel imagery that looks straight out of Nazi propaganda. I've heard their stock chants about pushing the Jews into the sea and completely eradicating the state of Israel. Anti-Semitism often takes the form of anti-Zionism. The way you oppose Jews in every generation is different. We live in the age of the state of Israel. Therefore, the attacks of anti-Semites will focus on that. Anti-Semitism is like racism. It's not fashionable and is illegal in many places of the world. But anti-Zionism is not, so it becomes the proxy for anti-Semitism. I'm not saying that any criticism of the state of the Jewish state is therefore anti-Semitic. There is a legitimate critique of the state of Israel. However, there is a way of telling whether what is being said is in fact a legitimate critique or anti-Semitism. If the statements being made delegitimizes Israel, like the statements from BDS that claim that it's a settler colonial country and has no right to exist, or that the Zionist state of Israel is a crime against humanity, which are quotes directly from a recent BDS rally, this delegitimizes Israel. There are also statements that demonize Israel or has a double standard for Israel. This is what makes it anti-Semitic. This is the anti-Semitism of our time. It isn't even a question. And the BDS movement is the largest example which embodies all the different telltale signs of anti-Semitism. The BDS movement itself acknowledges that few foreign governments actually have imposed sanctions from its work, and investment in Israel is at an all-time high. If the goal is to end the conflict,
Rabbi,
the goal is
I'm
failing.
really sorry, but
I'll go to the back.
Okay, thank you.
Michael Gordon, 207 South Fifth Avenue. I'm actually speaking on behalf of Rabbi Malamut from the Highland Park Conservative Temple, who couldn't be here tonight, preparing for the Shabbos and Yom Kippur. But he gave a rousing Dvar Torah over Rosh Hashanah, and he asked me to share some parts of that. It starts with everything has changed. What's changed also is that we look the different mindset on the issues of anti-Semitism. We've always known that anti-Semitism exists in America, but the Pittsburgh and the Poway shootings brought it front and center in our consciousness in a way that was very close and deadly. But there's a lot of anti-Semitism under the radar, and that's not in the media. There are daily incidents of violence and harassment of Jews in Brooklyn. There are defacing of synagogues, vandalism of cemeteries, incendiary tweets against Jewish personalities, the constant harassment of Jewish students, anti-Zionism and BDS on college campuses, and the normalization of anti-Semitism in America, whereby nobody sees a problem with anti-Semitic cartoons in the nation's largest newspaper. And if you're pro-Israel, you get disinvited from speaking. But if you're an anti-Semite, you're invited and protected, and important to hear your side in the name of free speech. Last week, Columbia University hosted a Malaysian prime minister, an anti-Semite, as my grandfather would have called him. And that's pretty ironic, don't you think? Because while you can't go to a liberal college in America without hearing about victimhood and intersectionality, I'm not a millennial, my daughter told me what that means. Safe spaces, it seems that only ones who are victimhood doesn't seem to count for anything, and whose intersectionality doesn't seem to count for anything, and whose need for safe space doesn't count for anything, are the Jews. Go figure. Anti-Semites on the right think we are too powerful and that we control everything. And anti-Semites on the left think that we are too white and too privileged because we have advanced economically and created a state that emerged from powerlessness. They both live with the same lies and distortion, and that's anti-Semitism. Go figure.
Thank you.
Hello,
I'm Joyce Ornstein. I live on South Second, and I'm talking about the resolution. I'm in favor of including anti-Semitism in a resolution, but not BDS. I think anti-Semitism has to do with hate actions and hate speech. I think BDS is a much larger question. I think there are many people who support BDS who do hate, who probably are anti-Semitic, and from the evidence that people have mentioned before me, no doubt they are. But there are also many people who support BDS who are not. It's a very large issue. It's an international issue. And I feel that by including that in the resolution, we're going somewhat beyond where maybe we should be going as a town, and also that it would limit freedom of speech. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm still Sam, and I'm back again.
Okay.
Clearly, this time, the Zionists out-organized the people who think like I do. And they're probably right. They have more people in this town than I do. There is a concept in the United States known as the tyranny of the majority, and let the minority have its rights too. I just remind you of that. I was talking about Balfour and the UN giving away the Palestinians' land. What if Governor Murphy or President Trump says to the people of Highland Park that the Lenape Indians had a long historic right to this land, it is sacred to them, and things like that, all of which is true. If you guys are consistent, then if they come with armed soldiers, shoot a few of your neighbors and tell you to leave the borders of Highland Park, you'll have to say they have righteous on their side. It is an entirely parallel argument. And the motion here, by ignoring the existence of the Palestinians, by ignoring the ways in which the Israeli state and corporations have oppressed the Palestinians, is taking sides in a major battle. It is taking sides in behalf of the powerful and the oppressors against the oppressed. It reminds me of the actions of many cities, towns, and states in this country when they took actions against black people and red people in this country. So in that sense, you've got tradition on your side if you pass this piece of racist language. Now, the rabbi said that BDS foments hatred of the Jews. I submit to you, you should go read Martin Luther King's letter from Birmingham jail, where he talks about the hypocrisy of people who do that. When this thing talks about outsiders fomenting opposition to BDS, that is the standard line of every racist Southerner in the struggle against Jim Crow. It's all outside agitators, guys. I mean, this is a stereotypical piece of racist language. And as for the last thing, somebody a moment ago talked about how in the campuses and all this, all the power is in the hands of the anti-Semites and this and that and the other. Let me ask you, what group of professors is it who are being fired? Is Steve Salida Jewish or Zionist, just as one of a half dozen examples? No.
Thank you.
I'm still Rabbi Baisley, and I'm now keeping in mind how long my high holiday sermons are. I'll return to this in a second, but what I want to make clear is this is about what BDS is doing. This isn't a conversation about the rights of Palestinians in the land. This isn't a conversation about a two-state solution. In fact, bringing all of that up kind of diverts from what this argument is what does BDS do? Now, does BDS work? Right? If the goal is to encourage a two-state solution, the answer is no. Despite scattered pullouts from Israel by some companies, foreign direct direct investment in Israel is at an all-time high. The BDS movement itself acknowledges that few foreign governments have imposed any sanctions. If the goal is to end the conflict, the goal is failing. If the goal is to spread anti-Semitism through a population that may not even be aware that what they are saying, doing, or arguing is anti-Semitic, then the answer is clearly yes. As the BDS rallies and protests have increased, so have the reports of anti-Semitism. I have congregants who are now afraid of wearing a Jewish star around their neck on college campuses because of the BDS rallies and because of the vile remarks that are being made to them about being Jewish and therefore supporting the state of Israel, whether or not they are in support of the state of Israel. BDS is anti-Semitic, and we need to pass legislation that halts its spread and condemns it. I don't think that takes away from the fact that we need to include language that also talks about hate in general. But BDS, the movement as a whole, as it's intended, not through how the affiliates sometimes enact it, is in fact anti-Semitic and ferments hate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Still John Kovac. Walk through any college campus or Rutgers, Columbia, Berkeley, UCLA. You'll see the videos on YouTube. Jewish students get greeted by intifada, intifada, intifada. Groups of people standing there with swastikas drawn on Israeli flags, or chants, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And everyone knows what that means. So they hide behind racism, imperialism. It's part of an agenda that they've already imposed on many college campuses. And now they've brought it into this town, and they're trying to bring it to our library. And we need to just say, no, this is not acceptable in this town. Thank you.
My name is Rabbi Yaakov Luban. I'm the rabbi of Congregation Or Torah in the border of Edison Highland Park. Half of my congregation goes in Highland Park and half in Edison.
And you live in Highland Park?
I live in Highland Park on North 6th Avenue, and I appreciate the council considering this matter. I am strongly in favor of including anti-BDS language in the resolution, and I believe that I haven't polled my congregation person by person, but I'm certain that that's the strong sense of almost the majority of the congregation. To me, it's extremely obvious that the BDS movement is highly anti-Semitic. The fact that they single out the state of Israel as if it's worse than all the other countries in the world to have a BDS movement makes it very obvious that it is about anti-Semitism. As a proud Jew, I feel that tolerating anti-Semitic behavior is legitimizing it, and we've had a number of the 2 synagogue attacks in the last year. Anti-Semitism in America is on the rise, and I hope that the council will include language which would not allow the BDS to operate in this area. In addition, as a proud American, I feel that the BDS is a form of terrorism. It's maybe subtle terrorism, but if the BDS movement would have its way, the state of Israel, the economy would be weakened. The state of Israel would not be able to defend itself against the Hamas in the south, the Hezbollah in the north, Syria, Iran that wants to blow up the state of Israel. If the state of Israel would not be able to defend itself, they would be invaded, and millions of people would probably be at risk and possibly slaughtered. And I lived through 9/11. I was at the World Trade Center when the first plane hit. I crawled out of a manhole, and then I, together with thousands of people, we ran over one of the bridges as the second plane was hitting. And I saw the effect firsthand of terrorism. And terrorism, any place in the world, and hatred and racism, when When it grows in one place, it has an impact in other places. The terrorism in Israel has been exported to other countries. There was this, in Israel, they perfected the art of stabbing people. It's been exported. Today there were stabbings in France, car rammings, and I think that we should all stand together to oppose any form of hatred and anti-Semitism, which is something that all of us should take a strong stand against. Thank you.
Thank you.
Still David Lowenstein. I'd like to know, can I ask the borough attorney a question?
Borough Attorney?
Several years ago, when a competing organization came into Highland Park, competing with the EMS system, I was told by you, I just need to know yes or no, that if in fact somebody ran into Borough Hall, into the police department, handed them a piece of paper or anything and said, I need an ambulance, call this number, they were obligated to call that number.
They handed them a piece of paper and told them what?
To call that phone number because they needed an ambulance. And you said at that time that the dispatcher was obligated to do so.
Well, I don't recall saying that, but I would think if somebody came in asking for help at the police department indicating they had a medical problem, yeah, I think an ambulance should be called.
No, a specific ambulance. In other words, they wanted a different ambulance besides Highland Park First Aid Squad.
Oh, when there's the other organization was
Correct.
talking about coming in.
Correct.
Well, they could certainly ask for a preference for what first aid squad would come and pick them up, sure.
Okay, so therefore, if anybody calls Highland Park Police at any time, day or night, and says, I want the Highland Park First Aid Squad, we are the first to be called. That would be correct?
Well, if you're on that period of time, if you're not on a certain period of time, no.
How would you know if that other organization was on or not on?
Well,
And it's happened, by the way, the opposite. We had one particular resident who specifically asked for Robert Wood in the middle of the night, and Robert Wood was called instead of us when we were on call. So I'm just asking, if a resident were to say, I want the Highland Park First Aid Squad, do they get that right?
Well, if you're not on call, it wouldn't be possible to have you go.
We can arrange to be on call. We're being told we're not allowed to answer calls. It's a totally different item. Because, by the way, we did answer calls when we were told we were not allowed to, because Robert Wood and JFK couldn't get an ambulance into our town, so we had to do it, and we happily did it.
Well, I guess if you're the backup on the day calls, yes, you would.
Wait, why are we never agreed to be the backup.
Well, the point is that
I'm really asking a plain question, yes or no. If somebody says, I want the Highland Park First Aid Squad, would we be the first ones to be called?
And I'm telling you, if you're not on duty at that time, you're not taking day calls, and the call comes in during the day, the caller would be told that you're not on duty, we'll call another ambulance.
How do you know the other companies are on duty, yet
Well,
you
because
take their numbers?
We have an agreement with Robert Wood. to
No,
cover
I'm
during
talking
the day.
about yet another company, the one we talked about. Right, we have no agreement.
No, we, the borough.
We, the borough, not you,
Yeah.
the borough.
No,
We, the
the
borough.
borough has no agreement with Robert Wood Johnson. The borough calls Robert Wood Johnson in as mutual aid. There's never been, or we've been sold to Billy Lewis, there has never, ever been an agreement with Robert Wood.
Okay, Borough Administrator, would you like to clarify?
We don't have an agreement. We do have an understanding, as Councilwoman Foster Dublin mentioned in her report, when we did not move forward with the proposal that came in for a 2-year
Agreement with Robert Wood.
agreement, they agreed to continue the status quo until we had time to work things out.
So what is the status quo? If they can get you an ambulance, they will. If they can't, then they just
No,
don't?
they would be our first call.
And when they don't get you an ambulance, what happens?
There's a mutual aid protocol.
Okay, how come we were not notified of the protocol?
I don't have an answer for that.
So it tells you, again, these companies are not doing their job, but it's okay. The minute you thought you had us and you didn't, you just pull it away. To Ms. Foster, I'd like to know, and we're allowed to meet our accusers, whoever told you we're having trouble getting our calls answered during the day on the weekends, or we're having trouble? Because whoever told you that, I would like to speak to them. And by the way, check your records, because in 18 months, we have missed exactly 4 calls. Twice because we couldn't get a crew, and twice because we already had at least 1 ambulance on the road. Out of 18 months. You want to count how many times Robert Wood has not supplied you with an ambulance? I guarantee you it's 4 to 5 times that number. Guaranteed. but you still don't want to put us in service. The last question I have is, how many of you in the audience are aware that your schools were put in lockdown last week? Do you know the Highland Park First Aid Squad and the Highland Park Fire Department were never notified? That's really dangerous, and that's really a problem, and it's a problem I've talked about for 18 months. People, you have kids in that school, I'd be standing up and screaming now because your kids are not safe in that school because neither the fire department nor the first aid squad has any plan in place what to do if something happens in those schools.
So David, you're saying that when the police were notified about the situation, the first aid squad and the fire department were not also notified?
That is 100% correct.
Okay.
And we should have been, so we could have our people go to the building just to stand by in case we're needed. Because God forbid we're needed, it's awfully late to first call us.
Or at least have people on call.
That's 100% correct.
Okay, so that's something we can look into.
Hi, I'm Barry Wolf. I'm a Highland Park resident. I live at 128 North 8th Avenue. I've been a Highland Park resident for 31 years, and I appreciate the borough very much taking up the anti-Semitic and anti-BDS legislation, and I'm strongly in favor of including anti-BDS language. I have a statement from Rabbi Kaufman, who's one of the rabbis of a large synagogue in our neighborhood, Ohav Emet, which is on North 5th in Highland Park. He could not be here tonight. I'd just like to put in my own 2 cents before I read his statement. Anyone who has even a cursory knowledge of the state of Israel from 1948 appreciates that the true lack of peace in the Middle East, which is extremely unfortunate and has brought a lot of suffering to the Palestinian people, is very simply a result of the Arab nation in general not being able to tolerate a state of Israel in any form, in any size along its borders. And anyone who doubts that just doesn't know history. The Arab nation has tried to destroy Israel for the over 7 years of its existence, from the minute it was declared a state in 1948, when five of the surrounding Arab nations attacked Israel in 1967 and 1973, and many other terrorist attacks. They have been unable, fortunately, to destroy it militarily, and the BDS is simply another iteration of trying to destroy it economically and politically, what they could not accomplish militarily. Now I have a Rabbi Kaufman statement. Natan Sharansky says that in order to determine if criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic, we put it to the litmus test of the 3 Ds. First, Israel is held to a double standard to which no other nation is held. Next, Israel is delegitimized. And third, it is demonized. Attempts at bringing BDS into our town falls under the litmus test and unequivocally anti-Semitism. The Congress has overwhelmingly defined BDS as an anti-Semitic effort and overwhelmingly voted for that resolution. The vast majority of Congress, the House of the American people, had the clarity and understanding to see BDS what it is and voted to condemn the BDS movement as anti-Semitic. And so I encourage our elected officials here in the borough to adopt what is right and what is true, and most of all, what is moral. And to do anything else would be against what is right and true. And that is a statement, Rabbi Kaufman. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just one second before I forget something. I forgot that you were here, Lieutenant Hamill. Would you make sure that you report back to the police chief and dispatch about the issue that was raised regarding not letting the first aid squad or fire department know about an emergency such as the one that occurred last week? Thank you.
Mayor, can I say something on that? During the brief lockdown that we had at the school, until the incident was over, it was like a half an hour in total before everything was resolved, and we found out that Highland Park was not affected in any way. That call would have gone to Robert Wood Johnson because it was in their hours of operation. It was between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m.
But that's not, no. We have protocols. You know that, David.
And I do understand that clearer communication should be had with the fire department. But I'm just pointing out that the call would have gone to Robert Wood Johnson
Yeah, okay.
if in the event that we needed something.
Okay.
And I also like to say that there's a lot that has been said, and I have put up with a lot for a very long time. And I've worked with hostility over and over and over again. I've been bullied, I've been harassed, not only on this council, when I'm in public as well. And it has to stop.
Feel the same way, thank you.
Okay, sorry, Josh. Go ahead. State your name and address, please.
Sure, Josh Przansky, 141 North 10th Avenue here in Highland Park, New Jersey. Before I get into my comments, I just wanted to first thank the mayor and the council for their continued vigilance in trying to make Route 27, Raritan Avenue, the northern part of town, a safe place for pedestrians to cross and to walk. Unfortunately, there were 2 incidents last week. There was a motorcycle and vehicle crash, and there was also a child from the school that got clipped by a car. Thank God everything was okay. She wasn't seriously injured, a little shocked, but not seriously injured, and just underscores the importance of proceeding with this rapidly with the state to get the road to be shrunk into 2 lanes instead of 4 lanes so that it could be safe like the rest of the town. Second of all, I just wanted to mention last night, my wife came home from a lecture. She says there are policemen outside our house. I walked outside to see what was going on, and Highland Park Police Department was there because a neighbor's door was open, the lights were out, and a neighbor called about that. They came to check and make sure everything was okay, and they really went above and beyond by speaking to other neighbors to get that neighbor's phone number so they can call and find out what happened. At the end of the day was that he left the house without locking the door behind him. He was in a rush. But there have been a rash of burglaries, I understand, in our town. And I'd like to thank them for their vigilance and making sure everybody's safe and watching out for it, even at night, day and night. And just to remind everyone to keep your doors locked and windows locked, which is what they told me last night, cars locked and all that, so we can prevent more burglaries.
Yep.
Now, coming to the situation with the resolution of anti-Semitism. As I mentioned before, anti-Semitism is not an action of either the right or the left or the center. It's an action of hate. And it's a hate that goes across the bounds of political life or anyone's political views. Hate is hate, and we have to condemn hate. Just like we have signs all over town, hate is not allowed in our town, is not welcome here. Hate against Jews is not welcome here either. And there shouldn't be hate against anyone, but we should be included as well. And a situation or the BDS movement, which has been condemned and has legislation passed against. I was involved with the state legislation, the state anti-BDS law, and getting that passed in the state legislature here in New Jersey. There are 25 towns that have anti-BDS resolutions passed on at the municipal level. There are 20-something states around the country that have passed anti-BDS resolutions. The United States Congress has passed a anti-BDS resolution. And miracle of miracles, last week the United Nations, of all places, came out and said BDS is an anti-Semitic movement. There's no reason why our town can't join the United Nations, Congress, 20 other states, our state, 20-plus municipalities in our state by saying that anti-BDS is anti-Semitism. It's not anti-Zionism, it's anti-Semitism. And just like we wouldn't want to boycott any other group in this country or anywhere else, for reasons that don't make any sense, we don't want it here as well. So I'm asking you, when you pass this resolution, when you compose this resolution, to include that as well.
It's 3 minutes.
Thank you very much.
I also, I just want to get back to the Upper Raritan. You mentioned Upper Raritan. Tomorrow afternoon, I'm going to meet with the new commissioner of the DOT. Councilwoman Welkowitz is coming with me as well. The good news is that steps have started to be taken to improving the Upper Raritan Avenue situation with the inclusion of electric capabilities for the new signage in the area. The borough administrator has been working on that, so that's step number 1. And I'm hoping that when I have her ear tomorrow, I'll be able to reinforce the need for us to move as quickly as possible on that.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, I wasn't planning to speak again right now, but
you need to
it's
state
very
your name and
Sam again. Friedman. The statements about BDS have come up really primarily since I spoke before. people are living in a fantasy world. BDS is an alternative to violence. The Palestinians are not going to take oppression without struggling against it. Gandhi, in the Indian case, said he preferred violence to passivity. So when you argue against BDS, you are arguing for Palestinian violence. When you argue against people like me, who are anti-Semitic and pro-BDS, you are breaking the possibility of a considerable unity to fight the real anti-Semitism, because we stand ready to fight the real anti-Semitism and not all this paranoid stuff about BDS. Israel is not the United States. Israel is not the country of me and millions of other Jews. You may not like that, but that's just a division within the Jewish community of the world.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Matt Hirsch, 333 Felton Avenue. Thank you for hosting this discussion. I said what I gave my thoughts at the last council meeting about the resolution, but I just want to reemphasize, because it ties in with something that came up with the First Aid Squad too, is that leading any discussion through fear is just will not end positively. It just never does. And I know what the UN has done, and I know what the legislature has done, and I believe why they have done it. I understand the motives. I understand why they acted the way they did. But I think to have a more intellectual, more honest discussion, and frankly, I am surprised to hear from members of our faith community not leading a discussion through a lens of fear. We need to do better. The Human Relations Commission asked the council to consider starting from a different place, and we are not objecting to any language, but as long as but that it just comes from a different place. My main objection, though, is to something that Mr. Lowenstein said. With someone with 3 kids in the district, it is really disconcerting to hear a member of the First Aid Squad speak publicly about how our kids are in danger at the district. That's not the kind of thing that you just blurt out in public. For someone, particularly somebody of your standing and your expertise and your knowledge of public safety in the community, that is reckless and irresponsible, and that's how you plan to deliver it to the community.
Okay, we can't have two-way conversation on this.
Hello, Mariam Gordon again, 207 South 5th. I just want to respond to a couple comments, because I hear your comment about not responding through fear, that we shouldn't lead with fear. And that's how we're responding to the BDS situation. But we're past the point of preemptively doing anything. It's not, the BDS conversation is specific, it's specific to the Israel, to the Palestine, but it's a larger conversation on anti-Semitism in America. And we need to be taking it's past the point of not leading with fear. It's a fearful time for American Jewry, as I mentioned before. And I'm going to take my time here to read just a bit of the thread, just some comments on the latest string of attacks against Jews in Brooklyn. It's not a theoretical conversation. It's Jews are being attacked just an hour away from here. Okay, in January and February, there were 33 anti-Semitic hate crimes in New York City. Incidents include Orthodox Jews being beaten, choked, and chased. Extending through the end of April 2019, the number rises to 82 reported anti-Jewish hate crimes in New York City. In May in Williamsburg, 2 Hasidic Jews were punched in the head unprovoked. One was called an effing Jew. In Borough Park, folks in a passing car were shouted out, "Do you know Hitler? We love Hitler," at 2 Hasidic teens. Hitler Was Coming was found on a billboard designed for comments by visitors to the Brooklyn Jewish Children's Museum. In June, a man waiting for a subway train in Brooklyn, New York, shouted anti-Semitic slurs at a fellow rider, then threw the Jewish man's cell phone on the tracks and attempted to destroy the recording of his tirade. In August, dozens of anti-Semitic flyers were found in Queens. The image on the flyer shows a man's head with a keep on top that has a Star of David in the middle. The words, "worthless, effing, cancer-filled Jew" is printed over the image. In 2018, a little backtrack, in 2018, 353 total hate crime complaints were made, 186 had anti-Jewish bias. 37% of 2018's anti-Jewish hate crimes reports resulted in arrest. Some more. In August 27th, This was the most recent one that was a little bit crazy, where a 60-something-year-old Hasidic Jew was jogging in a park in Crown Heights and had his face smashed with a brick. His teeth were knocked out. He tried to fight back. Nice pictures of his talus covered in blood. Those are just some of the sampling, and this is to say that it's not theoretical, it's real, it's happening, it's hour from here, and Highland Park is past being on the forefront, right? People have passed this already, to be on the forefront, to be on the ground saying we will not stand for any hate, and when people say that something is anti-Semitic, we need to stand behind them and support it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I agree, and when you got up and said that, it reminded me that I actually left out something really important. This debate should not be about whether or not anti-Semitism exists on the left or right. It obviously does, very badly, and we live in a time where anti-Semitism is on the rise, and municipal governments, governments at all levels need to be examining this and looking at this, but they need to be educating the public. This discussion can't be had in the public comment period at council meetings.
Right.
And I know that certain members of our council have promoted this from a good place. I understand that, from a very good place. People I've worked with for a long time. But the fact that the borough is having this very complicated, difficult discussion, heated discussion, in the 15-minute public comment periods, I think is poor governance. And I'm sorry, Councilman Hale, Councilman Fine, we need to do a better job leading this discussion and educating the public on this issue, because this is not how it should be discussed.
So I'm glad you brought up the education piece, Matt, because that is a critical piece that I know the Human Relations Commission has also signed up for, and education is clearly the way we need to go, and I thank you for pointing out it needs to be done outside of the council chambers.
Steve Sallet, 402 Valentine Street, Highland Park. I lived here for 30 years, so I'm here in a little different tone than everybody else. I'm here to uncomplicate things, okay? So, first of all, I want to express my support for the First Aid Squad, which saved my mother's life many times. That goes without saying. Now, as far as the BDS legislation, the anti-BDS legislation, I have no fear, and it's not based on fear. I have 2 of my children here, 1 of my grandchildren here in the audience, so I have nothing to be afraid of. But I will tell you something, and I want every one of you to remember what I'm saying. If this legislation is not passed, I will no longer feel welcome as a Jew in Highland Park. That's all I have to say.
Josh Brzezinski, 141 North 10th Avenue in Highland Park. Just, Mr. Friedman, who spoke before, you have every right to say what you want to say. It's a freedom of speech. We all have it, and you're all welcome. Everybody's welcome to have their views. But sometimes views have to be correct. I see tonight in our audience a Reform rabbi, an Orthodox rabbi, and somebody read a statement from a conservative rabbi, which really runs the spectrum of Judaism in our community. I don't think your statements are correct, that the majority of the Jewish community does not support Israel. I think Israel is the homeland for all Jews, if God forbid we ever need a place to run, which happened in 1939 to 1945. I think the Jewish community has been subject to anti-Semitism for thousands of years and been thrown out of country from country. I don't think it's something to belittle the state of Israel. I think you might have differences about the state of Israel, and that's fine, but I think you should be a little bit more careful about what you say, because much of what you did say was not true. And I will leave you with this one thing. Today I saw in the Israeli press, there was a girl named Rina Schnurb who was killed a few weeks ago when she was hiking with her father and brother. The murderer of Rina Schnurb is a man called Mr. Arabid, and Mr. Samer Arabid he worked as a clerk for the Palestinian Authority BDS organization, Al Damir, and his wife has been the treasurer there for the past 2 years. I think there's a very strict, a very direct correlation between BDS and anti-Semitism, because little girls walking with her father in the forest don't deserve to be blown up to bits because he doesn't believe that the state of Israel has a right to exist. Thank you.
John Kovac, one more time. With respect to the comments that were made that this is a complicated issue and it should be discussed and is an inappropriate topic for this council, even though it's appropriate for the United Nations and our Congress and everyone else. Frankly, that's just another way of saying I'm opposed to the resolution without saying I'm opposed to the resolution. And if you take a look, because the HR committee did present a draft resolution, and frankly, that's the resolution that said nothing about what BDS is doing. So to come up here and to say, oh, it's complicated, it shouldn't be discussed, I think that's disingenuous. And I think, again, that this council has to take a stand.
So I just want to tell John, Matt, John, what I do want to say is that the thing that Mr. Hirsch mentioned earlier about education, I do think that that is critical to our community, because prior to these discussions, many people didn't even know what BDS was. Many people did not know about the incidence of anti-Semitism in our own community. Education is the key for us to move forward beyond going past the resolution. We must be able to understand each other. We must be able to know where we're coming from. And people need to hear. They need to hear what everybody is saying. Here, you're limited to 3 minutes at a time. You've been up I don't know how many times. This is not the right forum for us to really get together as a community. We're not going to solve everything, but at least hearing each other in a different kind of setting, understanding where we're coming from, and learning more about what we are each experiencing and talking about is critical.
Okay, Robin Lowenstein, I think for the last time. I just wanted to say, and I'm more representing myself personally, I think, than the organization. First of all, I realized that the only two topics really tonight were BDS, which of course I have a very strong feeling about. And the only real committee report, I think, was public safety. So I guess it's appropriate for us to be talking about this. And I think that Matt made me realize something, because I've been kind of reeling since that report, trying to figure out where some of that information was coming from and what it means, because we were not given, and I'm saying this in the calmest, most respectful way, we were not given the courtesy that the mayor asked of me several months ago to have any kind of, I don't know, this information was not only, in my opinion, quite skewed, but we were sort of blindsided. And Matt brings up a really good point. This is not the right forum, but we've begged and pleaded for 16 weeks, and the committee has been unable to find 1 hour in 16 weeks to get together and have these conversations in the appropriate forum. I apologize for saying this. No, I don't really apologize for saying this. I don't honestly believe that 4 separate council members accidentally overlooked 2 separate emails. I think that we asked very specific questions that you either don't know or don't wish to answer. One of them being the date and the members in attendance at the meeting, and I gave you between very specific dates, because I think sometimes things are being very misrepresented. We're told the council decided. Okay, when did they decide that, and who was present at that decision? Nobody will answer. Any question we ask, nobody will answer. Why is this? How is that? And there's silence. So I guess it's not really a question-answer time. It's a chance for us to express ourselves as citizens or whatever. But very few questions are actually being answered. I'm being calm, I'm being respectful. And I'm saying that if you don't love the players, or you don't love their personalities or their way of dealing with things, it doesn't take away your responsibility as a public official to do your job, to respond to your citizens, to fulfill your responsibilities. As the public officials, it is your job. If you don't like the players involved, you signed on for this. So to make statements like, I've been bullied, well, let me tell you, I could sit here for a half an hour saying the list of things that have been said to me, that have been highly inappropriate, highly insulting, and highly dismissive. I just think that Matt's right. This may not be the right forum, but we have begged for the right forum. And I personally am done begging. I'm done. It's very sad, very, very sad that nobody sitting up there feels responsible to this community. Very sad.
Michael Gordon, 207 South Fifth Avenue. I just want to kind of bring it down to Highland Park, to our community. What's it mean anti-Semitism? What's it mean BDS? Is it the theoretical social justice movement like so many others in the world? New Jersey has the third highest increase of anti-Semitism in the United States, according to the ADL. Majority of that was on college campuses. Majority of that was driven by the BDS-supported student groups, whereas John said the students are greeted at opening weekend orientation with taunts and shouts. The Jewish tables for Hillel are upended. Students are harassed. Eviction notices are put on their doors, and I think it was in Georgia. It's not theoretical to say we're reacting out of fear. We see the wave coming. Progressive groups have been overtaken and hijacked by this. I mentioned at our closed session or the regular session we had a couple months ago that the LGBT Jewish community in Washington, D.C. and in Chicago were disinvited from the LGBT march because they had a Jewish star on their pride flag. Not an Israeli flag, it was a Jewish star, and they were told they're not welcome because the flag, the Jewish star, made people feel uncomfortable. That's anti-Semitism. That's not anti-Zionism. There was a group I saw this weekend, the Climate Strike March. My nephew is very involved in D.C., and I saw a poster from the BDS movement saying, "Stop Israeli climate apartheid." Somehow Israel is now being blamed for climate change or climate disaster in the Middle East. And the thing said, join our climate strike and fight Israel too. That's anti-Semitism. Now, if you have a Jewish student who wants to go to a climate march, they now are being attacked, and it's called greenwashing. If you say that we're environmentalists, it's greenwashing. You're trying to distance your oppression by saying, look, we're good. There's a term called brownwashing, when people say, well, Israel is open to all types, and we are open to all groups in the world. Now you're brownwashing the statement. So it will affect us, and we in the community here see it coming. We've heard comments with the library was the first shot across the bow. The organizers that stated on Facebook and other posts, this was their opening shot to target Highland Park. They knew the response they would get. They knew that we would not take it lying down. We need to have education, but when the shot's taken at you, we don't stand down anymore. We learned our lessons. We stand up as proud Jews, as proud citizens of Highland Park, and as proud Americans. And that's what we're asking this council to do. Let's stop it here in Highland Park. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sam Friedman again. But I just want to talk about honesty and consistency. He said, let's bring it to Highland Park, and talked about almost everywhere else. I'm not going to bring it to Highland Park. I'm going to talk about climate apartheid for a moment. What is that a reference to? It's something very simple. Not complicated, not that anyone said it was complicated. You certainly didn't. Israel, as the ruling government of Palestine, has taken possession of more water that used to be used by Palestinians at a time when water is getting short. That's what they mean by climate apartheid. There may be other things, but that's simple, specific thing. That is not anti-Semitic. You may not agree with it. You may think Israeli Jews deserve more water than Palestinians, which I would consider racist, but you would consider maybe okay. But it's not anti-Semitic. I was accused of having said the majority of Jews said something. I never said that. There's just been a lot of things. And the reason I'm hitting on this is that there is a lot of stuff in the press and in this room that is said that isn't true. And when, what's your name, Matt, said this is not the environment for education and calm discussion and stuff. I agree with that. By the way, I'm totally in favor of fighting anti-Semitism. Absolutely down to the wall and all the rest of it. But I also know that when you talk about anti-Semitic incidents, that I'm about to commit an anti-Semitic incident by some statistical people. I support BDS. I think the setting up of the state of Israel was a racist act. That's 2 anti-Semitic incidents for your tally. And if you really think that's anti-Semitism, I suggest that you really look deep in your hearts, because that's not anti-Semitism. I say that out of love for the Jewish people, of which I am a member. But the minute I heard about that happening, I said to myself, this is a historic mistake. And I said it along with lots of other Jews, some of whom are very famous. So let's try to do stuff in a spirit of honesty and love, instead of trying to build up a sense that people are being anti-Semitic when they're not. There are people being anti-Semitic, and we should fight them. Thank you.
Hi, Lisa Ben Chaim, 436 South Fifth Avenue. First, I want to thank the whole council for putting your time and effort into this resolution. Like Michael said, I'm more interested. I mean, I am interested, of course, in this country, the state, the region, but I live here. Most of my children live here. Hopefully, they'll come back. But and that's what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about here. Michael mentioned about the wave of anti-Semitism happening. What I'm concerned about is our reaction to it. And so we can fight it with education, we can fight it with protest, we can come out and speak. But I would like to know what the difference is between anti-Semitism and anti-LGBTQ, anti-African American. If that was happening in our region, in our area, in our county, in our little borough, I am positive that our council would stand up and make a statement. Well, we haven't had too many anti-Semitic incidences. What are we waiting for? It's happening. We see it. We hear it. The reports on the television of local, in terms of our state and in New York, our regional area, it's happening. What are we waiting for? For something to happen in our community, and then we have to come back and say, where was our support? Where was your support? We're asking for it now. We're asking for our council members, our community, both Jewish and non-Jews alike, to come forth and say, enough is enough. We do not allow any racism, anti-Semitism. We do not allow hatred. And if we, by passing the resolution, you'll be saying a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Andrew Gutrayer. I live South 2nd Avenue. I just wanted to thank the council for considering, and hopefully that you will come to the right words where you can pass a resolution against anti-Semitism. You know the pain that anti-Semitic acts in our schools have caused. Anti-Semitic discussions online in our own community have caused. And I think that you have gone out of your way to educate yourselves as to the what Michael Gordon referred to as the wave of anti-Semitism that is sweeping our nation and our world. And many of us sitting here in our cozy little hometown are terrified of that wave. Terrified because we see that wave is killing Jews. Killing Jews. in Sweden, in France, in Britain, in Pittsburgh, in San Diego. And it's coming from a lot of different directions. And we want to make sure that our borough does everything in its power, including letting the Jewish community know that it cares, to make sure that wave doesn't engulf us here. Now, there's been some controversy over the last couple of weeks and months about the concept of BDS, about boycott, divestment, and sanctions against Israel, and is it part of anti-Semitism, is it not? One, I don't think that it matters. I think that we need to speak out against anti-Semitism in every form, no matter what you think about BDS. It needs to be done, it needs to be spoken, it needs to be said clearly. But I want to thank my fellow Highland Parker, Sam Friedman, who I don't know, but now I do, because I think he clarified something tonight when in his final two statements, where he said he supports BDS and he thinks the creation of the State of Israel was a racist act. I think that tells you what BDS is and who supports BDS. People who believe that the return of the Jewish people to our homeland after 2,000 years of being conquered, enslaved, and wandering and oppressed, to our homeland to finally regain control over our lives to some extent. There are people who believe that that is racist and that it should never have happened and probably should be reversed. Most of these people also believe that BDS is a legitimate form of making that happen. To me, that tells you that BDS is a deep form of anti-Semitism. I hope that in whatever resolution you can come to that condemns anti-Semitism in all its forms, you can address the fact that there are those who want to divest and bring sanctions against the only Jewish state in the world as a way of expressing their desire that that state does not even exist. I think that could not have been made, that the connection between those things could not have been made clearer. Sam's going to come up and correct me or whatever he wants to do, but I think you heard the two statements, and I think those make it very clear. It's not whatever resolution you come to, it's not going to end anti-Semitism. It's not going to stop the wave everywhere, and it probably won't even stop everything here in Highland Park. But many of the Jews in this community are looking to see that our leaders care and recognize the fears that we have and stand with us to try to allay those fears, as you would for anyone else. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
I yield the mic to Sam Friedman.
And I just want to say, Andrew, that I hope that whatever resolution comes out of tonight is only the first step towards allaying some of the fears and concerns that the community has, but also towards stopping as much as we can of the rise of anti-Semitism in our community.
What happened when a group of Jewish people moved to Palestine, which they had every right to do? I believe in open borders. I believe that the refugees from Latin America and Central America have a right to the United States. When people moved to Palestine and armed themselves and said they would not hire Palestinians, and then drove 700,000 people out of Palestine and wouldn't let them in, that was a racist act. That was an act of violence. That was the boycotting of the Arabs, you could argue, was nonviolent. The use of military force to drive 700,000 people out in an act of ethnic cleansing was violent, and it was racism, and it was supported by racist imperialist countries. Now, you're going to claim I'm only attacking Israel, which I am at the moment. I actually attack many states as illegitimate. There is nothing in what I am saying that is anti-Semitic, because I'm not. If you pass this resolution, you're going to have to in some way form or whatever, enforce it. So when I make statements in public, which I will do, and which many other people will do, that we support BDS, what are you going to do? You're creating a situation of division, and they're saying it's going to make them feel more comfortable. It's not. It's just going to give you a situation where you're going to be constantly reminded that the Jewish people are divided on this issue. You may have out-organized us tonight. Other times when we've been here, we've had more than you have. Tonight, it was a bad time. I was the only one of us who could come. That's reality. We're not anti-Semitic. We do think that Zionists are anti-Palestinian and racist in that manner. And I have opposed racism all my life in this country and everywhere else. And I'm not going to stop just because the Borough Council passes a racist action. If it does, I'll oppose it.
Hi, Mark Colton, 41 North 8th Avenue. Thank you very much, Sam. That was delightful. So look, Benedict Arnold was an American also. That doesn't mean we're proud of Benedict Arnold.
Excuse me, Mark, if you speak into the...
I said that Benedict Arnold was an American as well. Nobody says we're proud of Benedict Arnold. But let me just not even go through the 40-page document of the United Nations, but let me just quote Martin Luther King, because Sam did before, or referenced him, I should say. So Martin Luther King said, no, something about discrimination. When people criticize Zionists, they mean Jews. They're talking anti-Semitism. Thank you.
I'm Ann Cheryl White.
And Cheryl, just move the microphone. Thank you.
Ann Cheryl White, 56 North 6th Avenue in Highland Park. And I would like to say two things. There's been a lot of comments about fear and acting out of fear, and I'd like to make a distinction between acting out of fear and learning from things that have gone on that make us afraid, but then acting in a calm and a thought-out manner. And I think when many of the people that are here have talked about incidents that have happened both locally and in the area and further away, they're talking about things that make us feel afraid, but they're talking in a way where they've stopped and they've thought. They're not reacting out of fear. And, you know, reacting out of fear is a 5-year-old who turns around and hits, as opposed to you teach them to stop and think and then react responsibly. And I think people are trying to say that there are real situations that are making us think and act. The other thing I wanted to say is thank you to the council, because there are a lot of activities that you support that try to work on building relations between different groups within Highland Park. There's the art program where businesses put art in their windows. There are other programs that are supported by the council and different groups in Highland Park throughout the year and over the last few years. But I don't think it's sufficient, and I think that the resolution would also be helpful.
Thank you. Okay. I'm seeing no further public comment. And so before I ask for a motion to go into our work session, I just want to remind anybody who's staying here that this is a work session for the council so that they can roll up their sleeves and leave here tonight with an agreement towards a resolution that we can vote on at the October 29th meeting, which is our next meeting. I'm going to ask if you stay here to please recognize that they have to work on this, and do not call out from the audience. Do not start talking in the middle of their discussions. I'm sure we have, do we have a public comment session? No.
Not in a work session.
Okay, so we don't have a public comment session in a work session. And so this will be all that we'll hear from the public at this point before we start rolling up our sleeves. When they are ready to vote on a resolution come October 29th, you will have another opportunity to speak up. But as I said at the last meeting, I really want to stop talking and start acting, and that's the purpose of this work session. So I hope you'll appreciate that and let them do their work. Thank you all. May I have a motion to go into work session?
Second.
Thank you. A 5-minute break now.